Hello again, I'm John Lord, and I'm going to hopefully in this tutorial give you an insight into how I do panoramas and tiny planet images, similar to what you see on the screen here, using Litchi, Lightroom and PTGui. Why do I use Litchi, Lightroom and PTGui? Well, quite simply, I use them a lot for survey work and I have them, so that's why I use them. Now, if you don't have Lightroom or PTGui, then you can do panoramas within Litchi, but quite frankly, the results I've had are nowhere near as good as what I get using Lightroom and PTGui. But it can be done. So let's run through how I do it. So the first thing is that we need to call up the panorama screen within Litchi, and this is looking down on a nature reserve not far from where I live, and so this is pretty well overhead where we are going to do the panorama. Now, in the panorama screen on Litchi, there are three buttons. The globe button is the start button. The bottom button is where you can change some settings. Now, the settings screens come up like this and allow you to change various parameters and so on. So that's sort of some of the settings, and the other settings are there. Now, I've never used these settings. I have always just let Litchi do its own thing, and I think it picks up the settings from the camera. Might be wrong on that, but that's what it seems to do for me. So and this middle button here is where the files get saved. So if you click on that button, then you can see all your panoramas. So this is telling me that there was a panorama done on the 12th of December, starting at 1317, and it's got a list of the images. It tells me the height that they were done at, which incidentally appears to be correct, which is unlike some of the altitude settings you get when you look at images within Lightroom. So that's basically the start screen. So what I'm now going to do is cut in an actual screen grab of the process of taking a panorama.
(299 feet altitude). 84% battery. (300 feet altitude). 82% battery. (300 feet altitude). 81% battery. (300 feet altitude). 79% battery. Panorama ended. (299 feet altitude). 78% battery.
Okay, so we've captured all the images, and with the Mavic Pro or Mavic Pro Platinum, there are 23 images, as you will have seen on the bottom of the sequence. So one thing is that those images are JPEGs. Now you might have the settings in your craft to take raw images, but it seems that when you use Pano mode in Litchi, it always defaults back to JPEGs. They seem to be pretty good to me. Would I prefer raw? Probably. If anyone knows of a way of getting them to take in raw, then please let me know. So, okay, so we've got the images. Where do they go next? Well, they're going to go into Lightroom. The reason I take them into Lightroom is that I want to do some adjustments. So here are the images, and I normally want to play around with some of the settings. Reduce the highlights, very important, especially this time of year in the Northern Hemisphere, and I guess, yeah, in the Northern Hemisphere, the sun is pretty low. So if you try and do panoramas, well, pretty well any time of the day, but certainly before about 11 o'clock in the morning or after about 1 o'clock, then you are, if the sun's out, you are going to get the sun in the picture. So it is always best to do panoramas sort of around midday or that sort of time, to try and avoid too much of the sun getting in. So the adjustments I make, I will normally take the highlights down a bit. Sometimes I will take the highlights down on just the images with the sky in. I will normally crank the clarity up a little bit to, in this case, I've had put in plus 25. It wasn't a particularly clear day, so I've put in a bit of dehaze, and I've cranked the sharpening up. So those adjustments I make. And one thing I will, as I've said before, is do not, when you're doing anything with certainly PTGui, do not be tempted to change the size. If you do, you will mess things up. Trust me, done that, got the t-shirt on that. So don't do that. So we've got all our images here, and so the next thing is they are going to be exported to a folder where I can pick them up in PTGui. So there's our folder. I'll click on export, and away they go. So the images then I'm going to pick up in PTGui. So we will find PTGui, and I will now load those images in. So here are the 23 images that were taken on the 3rd of January at about, well, 3:30 in the afternoon. So I've gone against what I've just told you to do, but this is really just for a demonstration. So I open up those images. Now, what I've said before is when you're doing images from multiple locations, you need to go in and change the lens setting and change the horizontal field of view and make that 1 degree. You don't have to do that in this case because all of the images have been taken from the same location. So you can just let PTGui pick up the EXIF data and work with that. So now we're going to align the images. And there we have our 360-degree panorama. Right, so next thing is I want to export that to somewhere where I can then subsequently upload it to Facebook. So I will create panorama. Now, one important thing is that you can see the size up here is 19,230 by 9,615. That's going to be pretty big. It's certainly going to be above 30 megabytes. And 30 megabytes is the limit for Facebook. So if you're going to put a panorama up to Facebook, they don't accept stuff after larger than 30 megs. So this needs to be reduced. So I happen to know if I knock it down to, say, 14,000, then create the panorama. Reasonably quick. Okay, so now we can just go in and check and just go to the folder where they are, and here it is, and the size is 27.1 megabytes. So that's fine. That is good to be uploaded to Facebook. Well, using the same data, I want to create a tiny planet. So one thing I'm going to do is go back into PTGui. I'm just going to undo the size and put it back to 19,000 to its full resolution. And I am going to go to Project Assistant, Panorama Editor. So there is my panorama. Now you can move it around a bit, and for tiny planets I normally like to have them facing north, or if there's a prominent line, a road or something like that, I like to have it sort of on the road. So next thing is to go up to the top and click on stereoscopic down. When you click that, lo and behold, there is the tiny planet. And okay, it's not quite the right size yet, but what we're going to do is go up here to projection, and I happen to know that if I put that to 190 and that to 190, then that is pretty well good to go. So there is my tiny planet, and then same thing again, I'm going to create my panorama and click on that, and it's going to save that away. If I actually do that now, it's going to say that there's already a file there, but I'll let it overwrite the file, because I just want to show you what the size is going to be, and it is going to be fairly large. So there's our tiny planet. Let's pop down to Finder again, go and find it. There it is, and it's 63.4 megabytes. So clearly that is far too big to put onto Facebook, and no one would appreciate it if you put that up. So this is a situation where I take this image back into now Lightroom, and I'll resize it down to probably 1500 by 1500 or 2000 by 2000, and then that's the image I'll then use on Facebook. Now, just going back to the 360 degree image, one thing you don't want to do with that is do not take that into Photoshop or Lightroom. The reason is that if you do that and make some adjustments, when you save it, the 360 degree image data that is stored in the EXIF will be removed, and you have to then run that through an app to get that put back on. And I've never done that, so I've never had to use the app, but I know an app is available to do that. So what does the 360 degree look like? Well, if we go to a a viewer that I've got, and we can open up the file. This is the one that I did previously. And here is our 360 for that area. So I can now scroll around, and there is a lot of detail here. It is quite incredible the amount of detail that you actually get in a 360-degree image. So we can scroll around, and of course if you are looking at such an image on an iPad, then it will pick up the inertia sensors in the iPad and so on, and it will move around. So it really is like you're sitting at 300 feet in the sky and just having a look around. It is truly magic. So that is the my workflow for doing a panorama. It certainly works. I've done a lot of them. Where you do have problems with panoramas is if you are, and I've done it, I've been on the coast where a lot of the image is actually of the sea, and PTGui does not like that. It doesn't like water, and in a lot of cases it doesn't like trees. But if you have a lot of the image on of water, then that really doesn't work. And what you need to do is to come a few hundred meters inland, so you get a reasonable amount of the land before you see the sea. Anyway, that is the my process for doing a panorama, and I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you again soon. Thank you very much for listening and watching.